Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Seth Joyner Show. Today is Let's Talk About It Tuesday. There'll be no guests. It'll just be you and I. So we will basically come in and talk about, what transpired in yesterday's game. I'll be taking your questions live. I also have quite a few of you guys that come on and actually, give me your questions live on air with me as we begin to, as the show progresses. A lot to talk about, a lot to get to, and I'm sure you guys got a lot of questions. Let's, I guess, deal with the 900-pound gorilla in the room, the Eagles fall to the Washington Redskins on Sunday, 27-17. And there's a lot of blame to go around for this game. You can talk about what happened as far as injuries, not having, the full complement of offensive linemen available, to Carson Wentz's performance, to Doug Peterson's performance as a play caller. The list just goes on and on and on. I guess the only good thing that transpired last week was the first half of that game leading up to the last minute and 37 seconds of the first half. And then obviously the Dallas Cowboys losing to the Rams on Sunday night. But how crazy is it? The Washington football team is in first place in the NFC East as we speak, as the only team that walked away with a win on opening Sunday. I guess the biggest question and the biggest thing that everyone's going to want to know, Billy Covington is already asking, what do you think about Carson Wentz? I think Carson's in a very delicate place right now. Because I hear a lot of people want to put the blame on him. I'm more of the opinion that, he's got to have the complementary pieces around him in order to be successful. But at the other end of the spectrum, as a guy going into, his fifth year as a starting quarterback for this football team, as a guy who has been signed as a franchise player on this football team, he's got to play better. And you know what? He says it, hey, I got to do better. But I would caution everyone, when it comes to Carson and his reaction after the game, I got to do better. I got to be better. I got to throw the ball away. We've been having these conversations with regards to Carson for the last 3 or 4 years. One of the major issues that I have is player accountability, because at some point in time, as a player, you've got to make the adjustments. You've got to make the change. I think that players sometimes, it's a good thing when you see a player step up to the forefront and say, hey, it's my bad. It's my fault. I got to make these changes. But at the same time, these same questions have been plaguing this young quarterback for quite some time. And his response has been the same. So, when you hear Doug Peterson say, hey, I got extreme confidence, in my young quarterback, that's all fine and well. But when you see a young player continue to make the same mistakes over and over again without there being any change to how he approaches the game, to me, that's problematic. Now, I'm not going to lay all the blame solely on Carson Wentz. A lot of this has to go on Doug Peterson. And I see Adam Rush posted, the biggest question, the biggest issue is the offensive line. Well, you know what? When you're a franchise player and you put up 17 points, in the first quarter and, first half of the football game, and your defense is playing lights out, where are the excuses? You can't keep making excuses for Carson Wentz. He has to bear the brunt of this loss solely because, 8 sacks. Granted, he didn't have his full complement of offensive linemen. But what excuse can you make for how they played through the first half, leading up to the last 137 of the first half, and how badly he played in the second half. There's just no excuse for that because, Washington had the same players. We had the same players on the field. We had some players that go in and out. But at the same time, Carson has just not learned how to say when. No, he doesn't know when to say when on plays that may go bad. And you know what? The other team gets paid to play. They're elite athletes. There's only 1,696 players in the entire NFL that's active on game day. He's got to be able to make the adjustment and know when to say when on a play. Not every play, is going to work because the other team, they got great players. The other team got great coaches, and they're going to make adjustments. The way the defense was playing, sometimes, when your defense is playing the way that it's playing, the best thing that you can do is throw the ball away, punt the ball, and let the defense do what it does, and then you play the field position game. I'll get back to Carson Wentz, and I'll get to some of you guys' questions as we go along here. Let's shift the focus over to Doug Peterson and the game that he called. He seemed like he had everything rolling in the first half of that football game. Goddard and Ertz were playing some good football. D-Jax had a big catch early on in the game. The young guys were making plays here and there. And then it just seems to me that, he got stuck passing the ball. Now, if you got two rookies that's starting on the right side of your offensive line, okay, and you get to a place where you throwing the ball is not really working, at what point in time do you try to slow down the defense by running the football and trying to gain some yards? And I know everyone wants to say, hey, the offensive line, they couldn't block. They couldn't open any holes. But I would submit to you in the first half, we ran the ball 9 times, 9 called run plays, and they were scattered throughout the entire first half. It's not like, they knew, that, hey, this is the process and this is what we're going to do. They tried to run the ball 9 times in the first half, and they put the ball in the air over 20 times in the first half. Now, you cannot live by that 2-to-1 ratio because what defenses do, as a former defensive player, I began to realize that, hey, they really don't want to run the ball. The run is just a key breaker in order for to keep us off balance. So let's just go get the quarterback. Let's just play the run on the way to the quarterback. And that's exactly what happened with 2 rookies starting on the right side of your offensive line and one of the preeminent pass rushing fronts in the NFL healthy and ready to go week 1. I think a lot of problems that Carson had, he had because of Doug. Because if you look at the play calling in the first half, even though he threw the ball a lot, they put the pressure on the linebackers, they put the pressure on the safeties and coverage to the tight ends, and it worked. Now, I have to assume that in the second half, adjustments were made, and that's the issue. Great football teams make adjustments as the game proceeds, and you've got to change what you do based upon what the defense is now showing you. It seems to me when they started to try to push the ball outside because maybe they were taking away the inside of the field, you got into a situation where that's where Carson really began to get in trouble. The play calling. I go back to the run, and I know for the last 3 or 4 years, many of you guys have heard me talk about this, and sometimes it's like beating a dead horse. But when you can run the ball effectively, or you're just trying to run the football, you take the pressure off of your offensive lineman. You take the pressure off of your quarterback. They want to be a play action team, but you cannot run play action and throw the ball if you don't establish the running game first, or at least you don't try to do it first. And it seems to me this is something that they're trying to do without coordination. I said last week, I love to hear Doug Peterson's post-game remarks because there's so many little nuggets that are in there that to the trained ear, you know exactly what to listen for. He made the comment in the post-game interview that, you know what, hey, I just called the best plays that I feel we have an opportunity and a chance to execute. Well, And he made the statement that I don't know whether, it's run or pass. I don't know, what that looks like, what the balance looks like. Well, you know what? He's got data analytics guys that are in his ear. He's got offensive coaches that are in his ear that could easily tell him, hey, Doug, we've thrown 10 passes in a row and we haven't run the ball one single time. Hey, maybe we need to sprinkle in a run here to create some balance. That tells me as an offensive coordinator that you're just pulling plays off of a section of your playbook for your game plan without any coordination. Because when you throw the ball, you're either throwing the ball to set up something in the run game or you're running something to set up something in the pass game. And to make a statement like that tells me that he's just calling what he thinks is the best pass play in the moment without any regard for coordinating the plays that he's calling on a regular basis. And that's problematic. 137 left in the half. We have the football. We have a 17-0 lead. In my mind, there's no reason whatsoever. That's just like being at the end of a game with a 2-score lead and you're running your 4-minute offense to try to run out the clock. Okay. And I get it. Sometimes, these coaches have this mentality where what they want to do is they want to go out and they want to, put the pedal to the metal. Hey, we can get 3 more. We can get 7 more before the half is over. But why? Why? Because the Washington football team's offense had done nothing. They had 1 first down at that point in the game. 1 first down. They were 1 for 6 on first down. So why? Why would you go out and try to get 3 more points when you already have a 17-point lead? You've got them in a hole. Come out and run the football, run the clock out, get back into the locker room, look at your game plan, try to understand or figure out what you're going to do in the second half, and then let's roll from there. But Carson throws the interception. You put him on a short field. The defense goes right back out on the field after coming off the field, okay? And consequently, the Washington football team, they basically find some rhythm and they go down and they score right before half. Now, the entire momentum shifted in the football game at that moment. And you now gave a team who had little hope of doing anything in the second half, you gave them hope that, you know what, hey, we've got a shot here. And that's one thing that you cannot do. That's one, you can't do that. You can't let teams hang around and you can't give them hope by making the type of mistakes that they made at the end of the first half of that football game. So I put that on Doug Peterson. Carson's got to throw a better ball. If you're going to throw that speed out, that ball has to be outside where the receiver makes a play on it, and he's the only one that can make a play on it. If that ball's not where it needs to be, then guess what? It's an incomplete pass. Okay, but Carson's got to put that ball in the right place. But at the same time, Doug has got to call a better play. He's got to call a better game. He's got to put these young players in a better position to be successful. And when you're in a crunch time like that, you got to throw the ball to veteran receivers. You got to throw it to guys that understand that when that ball is in the air, I got to come back to the ball. That understand that when that ball's in the air, if it's misthrown, I've got to figure out a way that to make that ball hit the ground. But I cannot give up an interception in that situation, even if my quarterback makes a mistake. Okay. So now let's hit up some of our questions here. There's been a lot. I'm going to scroll back down to the top and work my way down. I encourage you guys to give me your best questions. You see the number down at the bottom, 361-857-9847. That is the number for you guys to call. You come with your best question. My producer, Derek Stevenson, is going to bring you on live with me so you can ask me your question live. But let's just let's start with James Russell III. He says, Doug wasn't brought here to be a chess player or an X's and O's guy. He's an organizational tool that's right up Howie's alley. Well, maybe so. But are we going to absolve him from how the game turned out just because we feel that way? Listen, at the end of the day, whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, no matter how you feel about it, no matter what players are here, Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl winning coach. And I don't believe that was luck, because they had to go through some pretty darn good teams, and they had to go through a dynasty to actually win that Super Bowl. So I'm not necessarily buying into that one so much, that, he's a organizational guy. He's, a guy that's not an X's and O's, because he knows what to do. And he's just got to not be stubborn about it. We've been crying. How many years have we been crying, for Doug to run the football? Brandon Mariachi, he says, Peterson always wins when he runs it 20 plus times. And I don't understand it. Hey, listen, Brandon, I don't understand it either. Because the Super Bowl year, if you go back to the Super Bowl year, the football team started off bad the first two games. If you guys can remember, the fans were lined up over at the NovaCare Center, and the media, myself, and everybody in that sphere was saying, "Hey, we got to run the ball. We got to run the ball." And then the fans were over at the NovaCare Center, with big signs that said, "Hey, roll that blunt." They come out the next game, they give the ball to LeGarrette Blount 18 times. He's rushed for 137 yards and a touchdown. And now they get the ball rolling. Now we get the ball rolling in a positive direction, But for the last 2 years, what has Doug done? He's come out with an intent to throw the ball, and he has not wavered from that, and that's worrisome, when a coach will look at the situation and look at the circumstances, and he refuses to make the adjustment and make the change. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, the offensive line, the running backs." If you remember the second interception that Carson threw in the second half, okay, when we came back after that series, they came out and they ran the ball. Corey Clement ran the ball really well. Boston Scott ran the ball, got positive yards. We ran the ball maybe 3-4 times in a row, and then boom, he went right back to the pass, and he just kept throwing the ball, no matter how much pressure was on Carson, they just kept throwing the ball. We didn't run screens. We didn't do anything to slow the rush down whatsoever. And to me, that's worrisome, because, when you have a coach whose mindset is, if it's not working, the players aren't executing it, that's troublesome, because now he's not assuming any responsibility for things being the way that they are. You can't force a round peg in a square hole the entire game and think that it's going to work. The game just doesn't work like that. You got smart coaches over on the other side that are looking at what you're doing. And you don't want to know something? Ron Rivera and his staff with Jack Del Rio on the defensive side of the ball, that is not, I'll repeat it again, it is not Jay Gruden's staff. Those guys know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. They know how to make adjustments. Both of those coaches have had massive success as players and coaches in the NFL, and they're going to make the requisite changes and the requisite adjustments that's necessary to take away what you're doing. Now it comes down to, in game, what kind of adjustments can you make? But the problem was, before halftime, you gave all the momentum away when you didn't necessarily have to do it. You didn't have to do it, and I, for the life of me, I just can't understand why that was a situation. I guess Jay Koch, he wants to talk about the offensive line a little bit. He said, Kelsey wasn't finishing his blocks. One play, there were 3 offensive linemen watching Carson get sacked, and the other, Kelsey watched Carson fumble and recover. Well, hey, listen, at the end of the day, the offensive line's got to step up. Listen, those guys know. They know that the success of this offense, falls upon the shoulders of Carson Wentz. And in order for him to do his job, that means that they've got to do their job, okay? And I thought, everyone on the offensive line made their share of mistakes. And amazingly, I think the only guy that you could look at that probably played a solid game was Isaac Seumalo. I saw Jason Peters run out on the screen and run right by a guy one time. He didn't even block him. The guy, he made the tackle for no gain. I seen, Jason get beat on a speed rush on the fumble, the first fumble, got beat on a speed rush, and Chase Young knocks the ball out, boom, fumble. They took turns making mistakes, and that could have been expected because of there being no preseason, no OTAs, and all of those things. But the fact remains that, at the end of the day, you got a couple of young guys and guys who got to understand that those young guys are watching them. And those guys are going to play to that level that they see them play. If the veterans on that offensive line don't raise their level of play, think about the message that is sending to the young guys. Okay, so they've got to be the leaders. They've got to be the ones to get it done. They've got to be the ones to turn to the young guys and pat them on the back and tell them, hey, keep fighting, keep blocking, maintain your block, play to the whistle. That's what the game of football is all about. Then those young guys, they're just going to follow along and they're going to do whatever is necessary because they don't want to be that guy. When they get in the film room, they don't want to be the guy that everyone's looking at, the guy that the coach is pointing at that made a mistake, the one guy that caused the play not to work. Well, you want to know something? The entire offensive line, every single one of those guys that played on Sunday was that guy at one point or another. And when you continue to have those breakdowns again and again and again, this is the result that you're going to have. And if they don't fix it, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So David Crane says, I would think the running game helps the offensive line. Absolutely it does. I mean, think about how the offensive line is postured, okay? If we're run blocking, then that means as an offensive lineman, I'm attacking. I'm in attack mode. I'm driving, I'm moving people, I'm being physical, I'm being aggressive. That changes the mindset of an offensive lineman. So then when it comes time to do that pass pro thing, which is more of a passive type of blocking, that aggression is still in there. But when you're lining up and you got to passively block play after play after play, and you're lining up against a guy that knows that it's a pass play or doesn't care that, hey, you might run a screen or you might, run a running play, they got their ears pent back and they're just coming. What do you expect? What do you expect? There are 3 first-round draft picks on that defensive line, okay? 3 of them. Those 2 guys in the middle are no joke. Then you turn around, you got Kerrigan, who normally gives us all kind of problems at defensive end. You got the number 2 draft pick on the other side, that's causing problems. And then you got Montez Sweat, another, I believe, first or second rounder. So they got players there. I mean, did we underestimate what they were bringing to the table? Did we think that they were just going to lay down and let us have this football game? Absolutely not, because the minute that we allowed them to score 7 points before the half, the entire momentum in the game shifted. It all changed. Okay? Jonathan Granger says, hey, Doug has proved himself. Carson hasn't. There's some validity to that. There's some falsities to that as well. Because you could say that, hey, when Frank Wright and I forget the other offensive guys, that was here. When those guys were here, you had a full unit. You had a team of guys. When I look at guys that, Doug brought in, he let Grow go last year. He still got Press Taylors. What kind of cachet do those guys bring to the table? What kind of validity do their voice have in opposition to a Frank Wright when he makes a suggestion? Will Doug listen to those guys the way that he listened to those guys in 2017? I would probably say probably not. Probably not, because he's got the Super Bowl ring. Those guys came in after the fact. So when they make, and they're younger, when they make suggestions, maybe he hears them, but maybe he's not really listening to what they're saying. I don't understand it. I'm really perplexed. Monday was a miserable day. Today is Tuesday. It's still terrible when you think about what was right there and what was lost. Now, hey, the bright side is they got 15 games left to get it together. The problem is they're facing some of the best defensive fronts that they're going to face throughout the next 5 weeks of this season. And it's possible. It's highly likely that if Doug just doesn't change his mentality, that, you know, this team, by the time they get to week 6, they may be 1-5, you know, and that's a scary thing. But, you know, you got to play the game one play at a time. Let's figure it out. But, you know, Doug has got to make the shift. He's got to make the changes. Okay. So now, guys, come on, fire me some great questions. I want to get about 3 to 4 of you guys on the show with me, asking your questions. Give my man Derek something that's got some teeth to it, so I can bring you on and answer your question live. Lenny Logg said, "Hard to lose when you're up by 17. Get off the gas at times, fall back. Time is of the essence." I agree with you 100%. You know, you probably posed that question, you know, maybe in response to, you know, my earlier comments, but I agree with you 100%. You know, there's something to be said, and think about this. There's something to be said about how Carson plays in comparison to how Doug coaches. You know, Doug likes to go for it on the 50 plus. You know, Doug wants to keep the gas on the pedal. Conversely, you have a quarterback who believes and thinks that, you know what, every play is supposed to work. No player is ever dead. You know, to stand in the pocket and see the rush coming and not get rid of the ball, thinking that you can make every guy miss. There's this connect between how the coach coaches and how the quarterback believes he can play the game. Okay? The other team can make plays. The other team got great players. The other team has good coaches. You know, not every single play is going to succeed. Sometimes the defense is going to make the right call and put you in a situation where you just need to throw the ball away. The great quarterbacks, when you look at, you know, when you look at Tom Brady, when you look at Drew Brees, when you look at Aaron Rodgers, those guys have this clock in their mind, and they know full well, you know, 1001, 1002, 1003. When you get to 1003, sometimes even 1002, considering what you had on the offensive line, that the clock is running out. It's time for me to either throw away the ball, seek somewhere that I can escape and scramble and get some yards, or it's time for me to shut it down and throw the ball away and live to play another play. But Carson thinks that every single play is supposed to work, and you hear him talk about it all the time. I got to do better. I got to throw the ball away. I got to be smarter. All of these things, it all sounds good, but at what point do you make the change? At what point do you make the adjustment? And to me, that's problematic. Okay, let's see. Bob Landis got a question. He said, "Do you think that we will see more of D-Jack this week?" To be honest with you, I wonder what happened to him last week. You know, there was a point in time in the game where, you know, he kind of disappeared to the sideline for a while. And, you know, I posted on Twitter, you know, hey, is D-Jack's, you know, is he hurt again? He stood over there on the sideline. He never really seemed like he was right. I don't know if he took a hit to the head or something and was a little foggy or something was bothering him. But, you know, in a game like this, you expect for D-Jack, you know, to play a bigger role. He has to play a bigger role. He is the only veteran wide receiver that we have in the wide receiving core. So it's important for him to be able to stretch the field. You got Rager on the other side. You got Greg Ward in the middle. You got the 2 tight ends. You got so many weapons at your disposal, but with all of those weapons, D-Jack should be more of a threat. You know, he caught the one ball for 25 yards, the little dig across the field. But for the most part, they were playing off. They weren't going to let him beat him deep. And the problem is at the other end of the spectrum, you got these young guys that are out there running routes, and cornerbacks are sitting on the routes. The 2 interceptions, young guys running routes, not coming back to the ball, not running crisp routes. Carson just a little bit off. Cornerback sitting on the route when Carson believes that, you know, hey, he's off and he's back and he's going to get deep. Well, you got to be able to read that. You got to understand and know. After the first interception, the thought process has to be, you know what, hey, with my young guys, they're sitting and jumping routes. If that's the case, okay, don't you have built into the route tree? Don't you have built into the play and a secondary route based upon how they're playing? Because if I'm running full speed at a guy and he's squatting already, All it takes is a juke and just go on by him, adjust the route and the timing of the route. I mean, all of these things play a role in how well these young players are going to play. All these things play a role in how well Carson is going to play. And a lot of it has to do with the plays that Doug Peterson calls and the situations that he puts Carson in. All right, D, let's get a couple questions up here soon. Lynn Carey says, the plays to Ward seem to be the highest percentage of success. Even going back to last year, he moves the chains. I throw to him more often. I think that Greg Ward Jr. is the alternative to your 12 personnel when they go 11 personnel. That's, one tight end and one back. He's the alternative to the 12 personnel, 2 tight ends and 1 back in the passing game. He's the slot guy. If he's that slot guy, he's the guy that's going to work the short to intermediate route. He's going to work over the field like Zach Ertz does sometimes, like Dallas Goedert does sometimes. It's just really all about the personnel groupings that are on the field and the coaches that are the plays that are being called. And, as an analyst, when I sit back and I look, that's how I see Greg Ward and his success. If the intent is to play more 2 tight end sets, then you're going to see Dallas and you're going to see Ertz on the field more. But when he's on the field, I would think that, hey, this guy had a heck of a second half of the season for us last year. He did some really good things. And in doing those good things, he really hurt teams, in zone coverage, sitting down, finding holes in the defense, moving the chains. When teams try to get up on him because he runs so many short to intermediate routes, transferring those short to intermediate routes to routes up the field and making plays up the field. I don't know. Listen, I don't know if that's a situation where the play calling, he needs to take advantage of that, whether it's things that were not necessarily part of the game plan. I can't say what it is, but they definitely look like they were out of sync, after the first half was over. Pat Canning says, our analytics playing too much of a factor in Doug's play calling. Hey, listen, at the end of the day, it could be. It could be. I think that, the play calling at the end of the half certainly did, because if you're going to keep your foot on the gas, that's probably what the analytics say. Hey, you got 1 minute and 37 seconds left. Let's go get some more points. That's possible. I can't say 100% for sure. I know there's a big part of what they do. I know it's a big part of the decision making that goes on when they get to midfield. In the second half, Carson's second interception, I believe, had a lot to do with that. I believe that, when we turned the ball over on downs on 4th and 4, we had no momentum at that point in time. All the momentum was on Washington's side. 4th and 4, in that situation, in my opinion, you're already down. You can't afford to go for it there. You can't do that. You have to punt the ball and rely on the defense to make Washington drive 80 yards, and play the field position game. But you go for it on 4th and 4, you don't get it, your quarterback gets sacked, you lose even more yards, and now you're in a situation where a team that already had momentum, you gave them that much more momentum. They come on the field, march down, put some more points on the board, and now you're really, really in trouble. Jeanette Aiden says, Goddard looks good, 100%, 100%. I'll tell you one thing, he looked like he came ready to play Sunday, opposed to, the main guy, Zach Ertz. He just didn't look like he was there all day. He made a couple of good catches, caught a touchdown. I believe it was on the first drive. He looked good in spots, but I really didn't like his body language. Sometimes he just looked like he wasn't there. That drop on 4th down towards the end of the game is a play that you never see him make. Most of the time, if he gets his hands on the ball, it's a catch. But I think this is a critical time for Dallas Goedert to continue to develop. A lot of chatter going on about, hey, Zach Ertz wants to be paid. Him and Howie had a big dust up last week at the end of one of the practices and whatnot. There's some issues there. But there's also some financial issues there that kind of prevent the Eagles from really doing what they probably should have done last year or 2 years ago, as far as Zach Ertz is concerned. When you see the other top tight ends in the league get their big time deal, what do you think Zach Ertz is thinking? He doesn't care about the salary cap and what that means. He's looking at his value and his worth and what that means to Carson as a player, and he wants to be paid as such. And you know what? And listen, I agree with him. I would agree with him. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do when it comes to, what the salary cap says you can and what you can't do? Does that mean that all of a sudden, I talked about it in post game last week. I said, hey, there's a high probability and there's a possibility that they might not be able to sign Ertz for what he wants. At the end of the day, what does that look like? You went and you brought in a Dallas Goedert because you wanted to have the ability to have two tight ends in your offense to give you that flexibility. If they drafted one and they developed him, and now after 2 or 3 years he's catching up with the other guy, what's to say that they can't do that again? Maybe with Zach Ertz with 2 years left on his deal, maybe you trade him for draft capital, maybe you trade him to save some cap space, and then at the end of the day you go and you try to rebuild it. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating on what it could be. I'm talking about what the situation could wind up being. At the end of the day, how he's going to have to work it out. And I think, we made a massive mistake not getting him signed and not trying to extend him last year rather than waiting now, because now that the mark has been set by Kittles and Kelsey, he's going to want to be paid right there in that, in that realm, if you will. Let me see who else we got here. Bobby Eagles wants to know, do I believe that Carson will play 16 games? Hey, listen, if he keeps getting beat up the way he got beat up on Sunday, he's not going to make 16 games. If we can't get Lane Johnson back 100%, and we can't get, solid play at the right guard position, and we don't raise the level of play across the board as an offensive line, and we don't really implement any kind of running game, I don't see any way in the world that he's going to make it, through 16 games. Listen, I hope he does for the sake of the team. He needs to, but at the end of the day, he cannot get beat up and beat down the way he got beat up and beat down on Sunday. 8 sacks? That's not even counting the amount of times that he got hit. He got balls off and got hit, or got hit as he was, trying to throw a ball. I just think that, they've got to figure it out. They've got to figure it out. Because it'll be a colossal loss, for him to get injured again this season. Go back to that last question, Derek. I like that one. Ray Roman says, I would have liked to see Carson roll out some and D Jackson has to play. Yeah, he has to play. That was one of the things that kind of upset me as I watched the game on Sunday, because now you have all of these new coaches and a new brain trust that's behind Doug Peterson and how he's putting the game plan together. One would think that, Carson throws the ball on the run pretty darn well. And the only play that I seen that was misdirection, anything to kind of get Carson out of the pocket, to kind of get him away from the rush, was a bootleg that we ran that didn't fool Montez Sweat. Listen, good football teams, good defensive football teams, they don't fall for that. And then the problem is, again, like I said earlier, you're running play action pass to run a bootleg, and you haven't even established the running game yet. You haven't tried to pound it yet. You haven't made that guy stay home for plays that might cut back or plays that might come back to him. And then you're going to run a play action pass away when he knows that, the minute that play goes away, I got to get up the field for any kind of reverse coming back or for any kind of bootleg that comes my way. He just, did not put Carson in the best situation to be successful on Sunday, in my opinion. A lot of people saying, let's go Jalen Hurts. Derek Kennard used to play with the Arizona Cardinals and good friend of mine, and used to play won some Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys. He said, let's go Jalen Hurts. Hey, listen, man, at the end of the day, They paid Carson Wentz a lot of money to be the starter. You're not going to see Jalen Hurts. And I think if Carson gets hurt, you don't see Jalen Hurts. You either see Nate Sudfeld step in and let's see what he does. And if he can't get it done, hey, we're going to call down to Texas or down in North Carolina, wherever it is that Josh McDowell's hiding out at, and he'll be the guy to come in, and take over if that's the situation. Let's see what else we got. Hey guys, listen, you guys got to call in. If you want to be on the show with me, you got to call in. Derek, throw that number up there again, so they can see it scrolling along the bottom. I'd love to have, some of you guys come on. We want to take your questions. 361-857-9847. Let's see. What do we got here? Chris Wiles says, should the Eagles sign Devontae Freeman? Running back depth was exposed on Sunday. Well, I would ask the question, why would you say that? We didn't see the running backs really get an opportunity to do much to determine whether the loss of Miles Sanders for Sunday's game, was that big of a loss for us. Yeah, it's a big loss because we know what he brings to the table. But I don't think it was that much of a loss that we need to go out and bring Devontae Freeman in here. If that was the case, we were looking to bring in a running back. We could have signed him a long time ago. Obviously, the money is an issue. I just think that with guys like Boston Scott and with guys like Corey Clement, that if you give those guys a chance, if you give them a chance to get revved up, if you give the offensive line an opportunity, to get into some kind of rhythm and some kind of flow, then you know what? Hey, they can find some success. But at the end of the day, if you're only going to run the ball, listen, you're talking about running the ball 4 times each quarter is what they're averaging. That's not enough of a run to assess whether those guys can get it done or not, because they're probably getting 2 carries apiece. It's not like we're riding, Boston Scott. It's not like we're riding Corey Clement. Those guys are getting limited action. They're going to catch a few balls out of the backfield. When you get your main guy back, yeah. But at the end of the day, Devontae Freeman is not going to be the answer to, what ails us. What's going to be the answer is the fact that Doug Peterson realizes that he needs to run the football. And yeah, you know what? You might have some negative plays. But at the end of the day, at least you're sending the message to the defense that, hey, we're going to try to run. We're going to try to establish the run. And then we're going to base our pass plays off of what it is that we try to run. That's called offensive coordination. Let's see. What else we got? Jeanette Aiden got another question here for me. She says, Big Ben called all the plays as well, and he looked good for an old man and a bad arm. Well, hey, listen, I think that, the question came up, does Carson have the flexibility at the line of scrimmage to change plays and make his own calls? I think, sometimes when you're in the 2-minute situations, that might be built into the offense for him to do that because everything's sped up, and maybe, Doug gives him, 2 plays at one time. So, and that play, when he calls it, is called an abbreviated version, so everyone knows what it is. Listen, Big Ben's been running that offense a long time. Not that Carson, shouldn't or doesn't know enough of this offense to do some of the same. But I think that he has the ability to make some changes and some checks at the line of scrimmage. I think, he needs to get away from, the kill, check, because for me, I have not seen a single time where he says kill, where he hasn't turned around and hand the ball off. So if I see that and I realize, that that's a tendency, you mean to tell me that these guys get paid to do it? These defense coordinators that get paid to stop him don't know that every time he goes kill, that they're actually running the football? They've got to build some things in to give him the opportunity to make changes at the line of scrimmage and be more successful. There was a question on here about defense. We've been doing a lot of talking about the offensive side of the ball. I thought the defense played one heck of a game through the first quarter, the first half of the game. I just believe that, what wound up happening was the offense kept putting them on a short field. It kept putting them in precarious positions, and you can't do that with a defense. Sooner or later, that's why you have 3 different phases of the game. You got an offense, you got a defense, and you got a special teams group. And all of those guys, at some point, they've got to figure out, okay, how do I make my contribution to the win, to the W that we're going to have, today when we go into this game? Defensively, they played outstanding, but they kept being put in bad situations, as the game wound down. And sooner or later, like I said before, the other team gets paid to make adjustments and create things that they need to create for them to have success too. So sooner or later, they're going to make some plays. That's just the nature of the game. But, I'm not going to 100% absolve them either. Bobby Eagle says, exactly, no one is calling for Cox's head on the platter. I'm $100 million, and you put up 3 sacks last year. And I may have heard his name twice on Sunday. He agrees that Hurts, at this point is not better than Carson, period. Hey, listen, I hear Fletcher Cox talk about all the time how he wants to be mentioned, with the greats in the game, the Aaron Donalds of the game, J.J. Watt when he was, at the top of his game, some of the big name guys in the middle. He certainly has the potential to do that. But in order to do that, you have to be a guy that shows up every week. You got to be a guy that shows up every play. When I look at Aaron Donald play, he doesn't take a play off. He plays hard every single play. He gives everything that he has every single play. I don't see that out of Fletcher. I think Fletcher, when he wants to turn it up, I really believe that he's unstoppable. He's unblockable. But I think sometimes what winds up happening, he'll get the center and the guard laying on him. That's 600 pounds. It kind of wears him down. They brought in Malik Jackson and, Javon Hargrave to kind of take some of that pressure off of him. So he's got to turn it up. Aaron Donald doesn't complain about, double teams. He doesn't worry about double teams. He's just, kicking behind and taking names. And Fletcher's got to do that on an ongoing basis. We got our first live question. By Laquan. Laquan, how you doing today, man? What's on your mind?
How you doing?
All good, man.
Hey, I just want to talk about the the injuries. Actually,
Right.
Do you think it just happens, because it's a tough game, or do you think is something wrong with the medical staff? Because for the last couple of years, we've been dealing with these injuries, one after another. So is it just the nature of the game, or does it the medical staff have anything to do with it?
Well, Laquan, I think it's a combination of things. I think that the injuries certainly are a part of the game. These players today are bigger, stronger, and faster than they've ever been. They play less plays because what they're trying to do is preserve them, so the backups get to play quite a bit. And to the Eagles' credit, they've tried. They brought in a new training staff, a new weight training staff, a new doctors. They've done everything that you can do over the last 3 years to try to stem the injuries on this football team, and they just don't seem to go away. So I guess the question has to be asked: what's the end game here? How do we change this up? Even though I'm old school, I just believe that when you work hard, you condition your body. It's hard to play the game of football when you don't go hard, on Sundays, that is, when you don't go hard, in practice throughout the weeks. They had no OTAs. They go into training camp. They had X amount of days, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, where they were in shorts and shells and helmets. And then they got 4 practices that they got to actually hit before they went into the first regular season game. Hey, listen, it's no different from anybody else. All 31 other teams in the NFL have to deal with it. All 31 other teams are dealing with, injuries of their own. But I don't think that any team in the NFL has had to deal with the injury situation the way the Eagles have since 2017 to the present time. So maybe you have to look at, how you practice. Maybe practices need to be a little more physical. Maybe you need to figure out a way that, hey, how do we, how do you callous the body enough? How do you get enough hard work in, where the bumps and bruises help you get to a place that when you sustain those bumps and bruises during the season, that they don't really turn into injuries? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the Eagles are a multi-billion-dollar organization, and for the last 3 years, Quan, they've been trying to figure it out themselves. And I assure you, if there was a way for them to figure it out, they would have figured it out. But some people are just saying, hey, it's bad luck. They got to but bad luck doesn't usually go that way for 3 years in a row. At some point in time, it kind of levels itself off. But you see, it's just one thing after another. You lose 2 starting linemen, and then you got, a third in Lane Johnson, that just got his ankle cleaned out. Listen, he's not going to be at full speed. I mean, if he comes back this week, he's one wrong step, one guy stepping on his ankle away from, him not playing for 5 or 6 more weeks. It's just, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation. You got these young guys, they're going to have to step up and they're going to have to play. They're just going to have to make it happen. That's the way it is. They'll say it, hey, next man up. That's the mentality in the NFL. But I have no answer for you as to why this team has so many injuries year after year after year after year. I mean, it's just perplexing. And it's not like they have not tried, to address it. Let's see. I got to scroll back up. Daz Jackson, what's your take on our linebacker play? I thought the linebackers played solid. They weren't spectacular, but they played pretty solid. I think, they did a great job in the first half, covering backs out of the backfield. You've seen a couple of times they try to sneak, a third down back out of the backfield. Washington really couldn't muster anything in the run game to the second half. And even at that, when you look at what they did statistically, it wasn't that bad. But you're not talking about a high-powered offense. You're talking about a guy in Dwayne Haskins who is really still trying to figure out the pro game, a team that's still building, some young running backs that are trying to figure out where they fit, in the rotation, things of that nature. Only time will tell what happens with the linebackers. But I've seen guys flying around, no big plays, but they were there making plays at times, when the plays were there to be made. And, Taiwan McKeechin, says, what's the issues with the linebackers? I don't see them playing downhill. Well, a lot of that is, we got such dominance up front, from the big guys. A lot of times it's trying to figure out where you fit. When these guys penetrate in the backfield and they cause the running back to alter his path, a lot of times you could be a B-gap player, but because of the penetration and it cuts off one side of the field, that player's got to cut back the other way, or it's got to bounce wider. That's the benefit of having linebackers that can actually, read and run, and guys with speed so that they can make that adjustment and fly to the ball and get there. But, the jury's still out. After one game, what do we say? What do we say about the linebackers? Lawrence Melton wants to know, should Schwartz have heated Haskins up more with the blitz in the second half? They only got one legit receiver. Hey, listen, I agree, but that's not who Jim Schwartz is. I've been calling for that. A lot of people have been calling for that for many, many years now, for him to ratchet up the heat. And I thought that, with Hargrave coming in, with Malik Jackson coming back 100%, that we'd be able to, generate the rush with the 4 downs. And listen, we had 3 sacks, but still, that they'd be able to generate the type of rush where we could, get creative and do some different things. I don't know. I think, Jim Schwartz seems to me like the type of defense coordinator really only likes to blitz when he has to. I just think, that when you got a young quarterback, the worst thing that you can ever do is allow him to get comfortable, allow him to feel confident in his level of play, because what's going to happen, he's just going to get more and more confident. Listen, they didn't call any big plays down the field to really test our secondary. They were taking what the Eagles were giving them. The little short routes, the little dig routes in behind the zone, speed outs, the guys on the outside. They took it. They took what the defense gave them, and they just made first downs and they moved the ball down the field, not in long drives, but on a short field. a young quarterback can be successful like that if you don't heat him up, if you don't make him think about the pressure that you're bringing or where you're bringing it from, to make him, think that, hey, if my progression is right to left and you bring somebody from the left side, I don't see him. By the time I see him, he's on me. We just didn't create that kind of pressure on him. And to me, that's a mistake, because anytime a young quarterback lines up on the field, I want to force him to think. I want to force him to feel the pressure. I want him to make decisions under duress. And we just didn't see a whole lot of that on Sunday. So we'll see over time whether that changes or not. Bobby says, right there, put that back up again, Derek. He said, rest in peace, Jim Johnson. These days are gone, but never forgotten, 100%. I played for a coach in Buddy Ryan. It was the same way. He was going to bring pressure. Pressure is the great equalizer, in my opinion. And I don't care whether you're a veteran quarterback or a young quarterback, even more so when you're a young quarterback. You've got to bring pressure. You can't let those young guys or those older guys sit back there and survey the field and get comfortable with what's going on. So, hey, listen, we'll see where it goes as time goes on. Rafiq Jordan says, is Slay worth the pay? I would say so. I think that, listen, you didn't see Terry McLaurin tear it up the way he did last year. I mean, he gave Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby all they wanted last year in both games. And it seemed like Slay traveled with him quite a bit on Sunday. It seems like he's going to be that guy to move with each team's best wide receiver. Based upon the first week, I would say absolutely he's worth it. I think long term it gives Jim Johnson some flexibility in what he's doing and some change up in some of the things that he's doing to be a little more flexible how he calls defenses. Let's see. So I can't pronounce this whoever this is last name, but Breacher says, how come Howie didn't look for starting caliber O linemen after he lost 2 for the season and another right at the beginning of the season? Listen, man, if there's starting level offensive linemen that are out there worth their salt, don't you think they're on somebody's roster? No one's looking to give away quality offensive linemen. You're going to have to give up draft capital to be able to go and make a trade to be able to bring in somebody, with that kind of cachet, somebody with that kind of experience. Everybody's on a roster. And if they're not on the roster, they're not on the roster for a reason. They're not on somebody's team. They're not on someone's practice squad for a reason. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you got to bring that guy in. You got to teach that guy your system. He's got to get acclimated, and become cohesive with the rest of the offensive linemen. How does all of those things work out? How do you speed up that process? I think more has to be said about not making those improvements or creating that depth in the offseason. Eagles News now says, hey, why did Matt Pryor sit on the bench after Doug hyped him up the past couple of weeks? Great question. From what I understand, guy's got good feet. When the pads aren't on, he really looks good. But when he's going one-on-one and there's physicality in practice, he just doesn't stand up to the pressure. I hear, young guys like Josh Sweat never loses against him. He's just getting beat down across the board. Again, this goes to drafting because Matt Pryor is the guy that they drafted. How does a guy like, Herbig start over Matt Pryor, a guy that's been here, a guy in Herbig last year that couldn't even get on the active roster? How does that happen? So then it goes back to drafting. We drafted Matt Pryor. Matt Pryor is supposed to be, from TCU. He's supposed to be a guy that has versatility. They could play the guard position or the tackle position. You go into week 1 and you got major injuries and you start 2 rookies. That speaks volumes about Matt Pryor unless Matt Pryor is hurt. And from my recollection and from my knowledge, Matt Pryor isn't hurt. From what I understand, from what I'm hearing, they're not comfortable and they're not confident in Matt Pryor. And that's problematic because when you look at the depth chart, they don't have a whole lot. I believe that they signed an offensive lineman today. I don't know whether he came off the practice squad or off of someone else's practice squad. But when you start bringing in other players and you haven't even given this guy a chance to show you what he can do, that's problematic. That is really problematic for the Eagles. And this offensive line, when you lose two starters the way they lost two starters and you have to shuffle the deck and you got players moving all over the place, it could be a problem the entire season. It could be a problem the entire season. Let's see what else we got here. I guess you guys don't want to talk to me live today. Ain't nobody calling in, so I'll just keep reading. Cheo Scott says, can I get in there and change the culture, bring it back? Come on, man. What am I going to do? It's a good question, but at the end of the day, Doug Peterson has his culture. Jim Schwartz has his culture. This team is going to be, what Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz makes it. I'm a guy on the outside that's got some experience, having played 13 years and been around the game, for an extremely long time, that looks at the game from a different perspective. And I'm pretty sure, some of the things that I have to say, they probably don't like, but my job is to evaluate the game, to analyze the game and give it to you guys, the viewers, give you guys what I see. And I just see areas where, they could do better. They could be better. They could coach better. There's a lot of things that could change to help this football team be better in a myriad of different ways. But, hey, listen, they're going to do it. They're Super Bowl champions. Those coaches are Super Bowl champions, and they're going to do things the way that they feel that they should do them so the team can be successful. I'm just going to analyze and give you guys, my take as I see it. Let's see. Lynette DeShields, she wants to know, what do you think will happen between now and trade deadlines? Will they package Ertz or Alshon, in your opinion? That's not my doorbell, by the way. That's actually my clock that's ringing in the background. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I think, I believe I've heard that Alshon is, a couple of weeks away from maybe being active, that he looks good. Would he be a help? Absolutely. You got a lot of young guys out there. You probably need, some veteran leadership on the team. I don't think that they can move Alshon. I believe that, the injuries prevented them from doing it. And I think the way that, how he restructured his contract last year, that there is no way that they're going to be able to, trade that contract. No one's picking up that contract. As far as Ertz is concerned, listen, I think that Doug loves him. I think Carson loves him. I think that Howie loves him. I think the city of Philadelphia loves him. Listen, he's a good player. It will basically come down to how they can work out the dollars and cents. Can they get a deal done that Zach can be happy with, and a deal that makes sense and helps the team from a financial standpoint? At the end of the day, that's really, what it comes down to. Last question before we get out of here today. Cheo Scott, he says, do you believe in the bench players? Well, Cheo, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't really matter whether I believe in them or not. The coaching staff has got to believe in them enough to put them out there to fill in where they need to fill in. I've always said that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and your weakest link is the next man up. Those guys have got to step in. They can't be Brandon Brooks. Herbert can't be Brandon Brooks. Jack Driscoll is not going to be Lane Johnson. But those guys have got to figure out a way to get the job done, no matter what the circumstances are. Josh Sweat has got to figure out a way to raise his level of play. Those linebackers, they're in position, to be starters. They've got to figure out a way to raise their level. The first and second year guys who are rookies, a year or 2 years ago, they got to figure out a way to raise their level. Everyone has to do it. It's going to take a team effort, but it's also going to take this coaching staff realizing that they've got to put these players in the best possible position that they can put them in for these players to be successful. They got to run the football. They got to continue to do what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. And from time to time, hey, you're going to have to come with pressure. The NFL, the way that the game is set up for offenses to dominate. So if you're going to sit back and play bend but don't break style defense, you better darn well be, lights out in the red zone, because teams are going to get yards and they're going to move yards. The Eagles had a great game defensively, other than the fact that, you'll look at it and say, well, hey, they scored 27 points on us. A lot of that had to do with field position. A lot of that had to do, with our ineptness on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, in the second half. Not an excuse, because when you're on the defense, it's your job to keep them out of the end zone. They got to figure out a way to do it. Well, that being said, we're going to close with a little bit, talk about the Rams coming in here. I don't know if you guys saw them, just take apart the Dallas Cowboys Sunday night, but man, they look good on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to give this offensive line and Carson Wentz fits, so they better buckle it up and be ready to go. And I tell you, on the defensive side of the ball is going to be one of the biggest tests in this early in the season, because you look at the Rams, they are going to come in here and they're going to try to establish the running game, and they're going to play action you with motion every which way to Sunday. The one position that I want you guys to pay attention to, I want you to watch Brandon Graham, because Brandon Graham plays the defensive end, in my opinion, in a non-traditional way, in an undisciplined way. And I'm not saying that it's his fault. I think that, I've always said that what you see on the field is something that's either coached or something that's allowed. You see Brandon Graham lose contain quite a bit. And the Los Angeles Rams, they like play action pass. That's why they're running the ball more than they ever have. And they love bootlegs and rollouts, things where they get Goff on the move, Jared Goff on the move, and get him outside of the pocket. So look for, dive action to the defensive right and Jared Goff bootlegging out to the right to Brandon Graham's side. If we don't play that, it's going to be a long day, because that guy that comes across in the flat, 9 times out of 10, that guy is going to be open. So the defensive end on that side, he's got to be on his game. When Jared Goff bootlegs out, Brandon Graham's got to be up the field, and he's got to put pressure on him to make a great throw. If they don't, it's going to be a long day, because they're going to pound the rock. It's old school style. They're going to pound the rock, and they're going to go play action pass with the short passing game, to Woods and Cooper Kupp, and all the weapons that they have. And, the Eagles got their hands full. They got a tough one to try to pull themselves to even here and try to figure out, how to salvage their season, because at 0-2, that's not the start that you want when you think about what's coming down the pipe. Well, that'll do it. That is the Seth Joyner Show for Week 1 in the NFL. Week 1 of our Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, they go down 27-17 to the Washington football team. Join me here next week. We have another good show for you. I have a guest that you'll be happy to hear from. He'll give you his thoughts on the game and his thoughts on, what the prognostication is for the Philadelphia Eagles moving forward. And I want to thank my producer, Derek Stevenson and Tom Schrader. As we sign off, I will say to you guys once again, hey, take care of each other, be good to each other, and love each other. I'll see you right back here next Tuesday. Peace.